Tonight, Toledo 11, the news channel, presents Barn Again, a special look at these treasures of our fields on 11 at 7.
The pale promise of a new day washes its first light over these fields of northwest Ohio. A timid and shy morning, like so many others out here, where time moves ever so slowly over an earthen sea. And for those who pass by these country roads and who take the time to look and listen, this rural sea offers many quiet treasures, little and large.
These barns are a sheer image of hardworking rural families and farm families, and they're just a real proud emblem of where we stand and what we see in rural America, in rural Ohio.
The barns, the silent ships moored on the fields of our heritage, thousands of them, quietly afloat on a tide of time. Designs and dreams born of other lands, ships of many shapes and many sizes, simple yet elegant products of function, crafted of hand-hewn timbers and sculpted to fit the needs of their makers. And like ships, constructed to endure a century of storms. Many of them have. Many, older than we are, still alive, defiantly standing as towering reminders of who we are and where we came from and why we are here.
A lot of times when the immigrants came to the United States, they picked their farmstead, and the first building that usually went up was the barn. And that was the priority for the farm, to get that barn up and working to generate income for the family.
And when you take a good look at these old barns, you're actually looking at the remnants of a notorious black swamp that doesn't exist anymore. Structures pegged together of native timber, built on foundations of native stone, mortared by the kindness of neighbors.
Those building materials have come probably no further than a quarter mile or maybe half a mile from where that barn stands, because that wood came from an existing woods, the forested area that we had in northwest Ohio. Those materials were made locally and put into that barn.
They were solid materials that would defy the distress of the decades. Even today, the painted names and dates stubbornly cling to the bodies of these wooden giants, proud testaments to their character and to the character of those who built them. But many are tired and weary with age. They sag with rot, bow to the wind, wither against the sun, and too often just painfully surrender to neglect.
You know, what's standing is reaching critical mass. They're reaching an age where they have to have some kind of investment made in them to keep them going for another 100 or 125 years.
These barns were built to stand the test of time, but when they're not painted or kept a good roof on them, they can deteriorate very quickly.
And sadly, for many of these stoic giants, the paint is peeling away from their tomorrows, leaving them vulnerable and naked to the aggression of nature and neglect.
What's it about? It's about people seeing something disappearing. Maybe, again, we've reached that critical mass where people are starting to notice that the things are disappearing.
Historian Maura Johnson is hoping they don't disappear. But barns like this one, the Care Barn near Jerry City, are fragile. It's a rare and aging antique, still adorned with the distinctive and ornate cupolas that rise above its gabled roof. But the years can be cruel, and once proud workmanship is easily wounded by the wind. when its wood was new and its paint was fresh, it was a monument to the prosperity of southern Wood County and the oil boom at the turn of the century, the pride of John Knight, a wealthy oil man of the era. That pride has survived. Despite the obvious torment of time, the louvered windows remain, as do the stones of the foundation taken from a local quarry. And inside, you can still sense its tenacious character, the now faded sounds and feelings that old barns evoke, from the movement of cows and horses, to the flapping of pigeon wings in the rafters, and the clink of the tools that have since turned to rust. Yesterday is alive here.
If it's one of a kind, like the Kerr barn here, is just so exceptional, I think there is a compelling case that might be made for this building needs attention more than others. Once you determine that, once you determine the significance of the building, then you start looking at the dollars and cents.
And it's because of the dollars and cents and a lot of common sense, they just don't build them like this anymore. In fact, most of them aren't needed anymore. Not since the 1940s and 50s, when agriculture became modernized, ushering in an era of larger and fewer working farms and vanishing livestock, and farm machinery that would require ever larger storage space, a new reality for farming, one which meant that the future of the big and friendly wooden barn would soon fade to gray with every harvest. They're most often replaced today with steel-sided barns. They're cheaper and easier to maintain. Cold cousins without character. But in these times of farming's tight margins and financial uncertainty, the sentimental usually yields to the practical. And so it seems that with every season, every hard winter, and every sweep of the wind, another silent ship is swallowed by the quiet sea of soil.
They're beautiful things, and they are landmarks for us that we miss when they're gone, and they're going.
It's nice to see kept up. I really, hate to see these old barns, just kind of fall apart, because they're built to last forever. And if they take care of them, they will last a long time.
Keith Schrader of Ridgeville in Henry County knows about the life of old barns, and what he knows is there's still a lot of life left in them. In his nearly 100-year, 4-generation old barn, he's running a modern-day hog operation.
Yeah, I usually feed, right around 250 to 300 hogs at a time.
The barn wasn't always this full of life. Built by his grandfather in 1905, it was used for about 60 years as a dairy barn. But then, about 30 years ago, things changed.
Probably like in the mid-60s, they had quit milking, because that was the time period where it was either, to get bigger or else get out. And so they had, he quit, quit milking, and I was just a, young boy then, and so the barn sat empty for probably at least 10, 12 years.
But the old empty barn would soon get a second chance.
Kind of had interest in farming, so I wanted to, to kind of use it, so I started remodeling the barn to use for feeding hogs. This barn, like a lot of them, used to have a wooden floor in, part of it. And that wooden floor used to probably be up here about like this, and, there was kind of a ramp coming up here. And so I tore all that wooden floor out and, poured some cement.
Little by little, piece by piece, Keith brought the old red barn back to life. Oh, some things have changed. The milking parlors are gone, but much of it, like the hand-hewn beams, are still intact. You can even see the old scars of the blade left by his grandfather almost a century ago. And so Keith Schrader is one of many farmers who, with patient husbandry and hard work, have saved the family history, the family legacy, and probably saved some dollars in the long run. Because after all, farms are not museums. They are businesses.
We use the barns to make a living, and we don't farm a lot of acres, but we raise a lot of livestock. And
Fulton County farmer Dean Genter also knows the value of saving his family's century-old barn near Archbold. Most of it has remained the same since his great-grandfather, on his mother's side, built it back in 1892. Dean wants to keep it that way.
yeah, there's a lot of history behind it, and that's probably the main reason, because it's family. It's been in the family. And
Dean didn't say it outright, but we suspect he likes looking up in the haymow where he used to play as a kid. Takes comfort knowing it's still stuffed with hay. That the old slings used by his kinfolk to pull the bundles of hay and straw from horse-drawn wagons still droop from the hooks. That on a sunny day, slices of light strain to get through the windows and the openings and fall across the shadows to make moving and moody mosaics against the darkened floors and walls. And a measure of satisfaction is taken by all generations of Genters, knowing it's all being held together by raw timbers of elm that was harvested from the family's nearby woods 105 years ago.
We had about 20 acres of woods, so they got all the timbers, the sawmill came to the farm, they cut it out right on the farm here, and then they had the neighbors build it. So, and I might mention too that the total cost back there was $960.
it's just amazing. Just you look at the framework, even that bit of a framework is holding this building up like it is.
Well, I'm still proud of it, and I still hope it stays here for the next 3-4 generations to come.
And it probably will, for the Genter family pride is as durable and rare as the tough slate that shields the roof, which means that mending a roof like this takes a little extra effort, requiring the Genters to go out and harvest the materials wherever they can find them.
Some of these old barns, the only way you can get replacement things is to find another barn that's fallen down that you can get siding or beams or whatever,
Yeah.
That's the only way that you can really, try to keep it as much original as you can, but if you want to do that, that's the only way you can do it.
So this barn gets a lot of nurturing, and Dean Genter is glad to do it, whether it means bathing the siding in new white paint every few years, or even pouring a brand new foundation to keep it securely fastened to the land and the future. And the future here is hopeful. The Genter barn has been recognized by the National Barn Again program as an outstanding example of how an old barn can be given a new life, prompting those who love old barns to often stop for a closer inspection.
This last year has been when I, realized people are, interested in saving old barns, and it's almost like art to a lot of people or whatever. They just, I guess people miss not seeing them around, and there's just like farmland. There's fewer and fewer of them around, and fewer acres every day.
And with fewer working farms, the barns are steadily becoming an endangered species, eroding landmarks, wilting with the frost of financial reality. But they are not fading without notice, for there's something else that's rising from the fields besides beans and corn. It's not the savage flame that threatens to snuff out the life of this orphaned barn, nor is it the muscle of a sudden gale wind or the bullying of a wrecking crew, for its desperation is merely found in the slow dance of nature, reclaiming its own, the strangling determination of feral weeds against its walls, springing up every year as volunteers to wind their way into convenient holes and openings, creating highways for insects that find shelter in its weary wood. So that season by season, this barn or any barn left to the capricious will of nature around it become vulnerable prey to the inevitable. Another board splits so that its walls are lost. Another shingle is pried away so that the roof is lost. And another layer of rust is frosted upon its nails so that after enough time its firm grip is lost. And then, after the relentless press of a sun from 100 summers or the cruel wrath of 100 winters, the assault on its naked skin is efficient and complete. And then comes the surrender to the crush of gravity. A quiet and slow-motion drama played out every year in the theater of the fields, where the derelict are stripped of their dignity and left to die, reclaimed by the land to which they belong. But not all vacant barns are falling to this fate.
The bottom of the barn is all where the animals stayed, and the top of it is actually just a huge haymow.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
This is the barn that Jesse built, Jesse Grant, sometime in the 1920s. Handsome and red and very big.
We have to go in this way, and then I can open the big door. Yes, people stop by, they want to come in and look at it, take pictures of it. Yeah. It is the largest barn in the county, we know that.
Sadly, the only use this barn gets these days is when the curious along State Route 15 stop to admire its sheer size or gaze in wonder at its intricate geometry of wood. A frame of timbers that rises to the peaks like a rustic cathedral. A study in textures, a study in time. And like a sanctuary, it's mostly quiet these days. What had been a massive area on the main floor for hay storage is all but empty now, revealing the cavernous dimensions of two barns joined together. And even though it hasn't been used as a working dairy barn for decades, the sweet perfume of grain and hay and animals long departed are very much alive, lingering in the memory of the wood.
This is where all the animals were kept, down here.
Down in the basement is where Jesse Grant actually kept his cattle so many years ago, and most everything is here, except for the livestock. The stalls, the feed troughs, the milking parlors, and an ingenious conveyor track that Jesse Grant designed and built to haul away the daily debris of manure.
Kids think it's some sort of ride like at Cedar Point now.
Well, sure, why not?
They give their friends rides in the manure cart.
Perhaps what's more intriguing about this barn than its size, or its character, or its history, is its future.
Keeping it alive, right. Trying to keep it standing, and so that, generations to come can see what this part of life was like. I mean, they really won't know.
You see, Kathy and her husband aren't farmers. They have no real need for a building like this. They don't intend to put in a dairy herd, or raise feeder hogs, or plant the back 40 with corn. But they do intend to make sure this barn and all the other outbuildings on Jesse Grant's farm stay intact, just the way Jesse left them.
Well, there's just so much history involved. It's just, it'll be a gone era. I mean, everything is metal building now, and it's all it's very efficient for today's farming environment, but there's just so much history here in how people lived and worked these buildings, and once it's gone, no one's going to build them again.
Kathy Boff and her husband are well aware that it will mean a bounty of time and money to keep this landmark standing, but to them, it's worth it. Perhaps they see something here that's worth saving for other generations, a vision that is germinating across the country.
To me, preservation is about people longing for familiar places. It's a sensation, it's an emotion that keeps people grounded and feeling connected to where they live. And it's a large part, I think, in a sense of community.
Perhaps many of us are discovering that the barns that stand tall in our fields have, in a way, taken much deeper root than the crops around them.
Well, my grandfather was a barn builder. He built barns in northwest Ohio. And over time, I've heard him tell stories of how he builds barns and all the mathematics and the construction that goes into building one of these buildings. And it's like a puzzle, not put together, that maybe sat out standing timber and then was converted to a nice barn like we have.
It means something when you walk in the door, doesn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, we've been here, we've owned this farm since I was in junior high. And, and you can see the pictures of what it looked like before and the work that, Dad and I put in this place to get it back looking nice again. And it just, there's a lot of sentimental reasons for that.
And an old barn is more than just a building, a structure of planks and timbers and beams. It's a story, a three-dimensional living tale of where many of us came from.
So really, what you see, the materials themselves are one piece of the story about how people came here and settled.
And it's a story that's not over. There are new chapters of change, of course, but the land is still fertile and pregnant with possibility, cut and carved and planted and picked every season. And now there's something else growing out here, a new crop of consciousness about these giants that we call barns, a realization that clatters like the corn in autumn, reminding us that the sun has not set, not quite yet, on the future of our past.
Barns can be very special places, evoking some powerful images. Maybe it's being out on a snow-covered morning like this, slopping the hogs, or hand-feeding a hungry calf with a bottle through the slats of a wooden stall. Whatever, these are images we like to hang on to. If you're interested in seeing or saving an historic barn in your area, you might want to check with the local historical society or your agricultural extension agent. They may have some good ideas on how you can do it. And remember, the next time you're just out driving around the countryside and you see an old barn like this, remember, it may be one of the most valuable things that ever rises from these fields.